Hey guys, welcome to Blue Titan On Demand. I'm Coach Eric.
I'm Coach Cheryl.
And we're here today to go over our introduction to self-defense. Now this is a combination of Krav Maga and Eric Maga because everything becomes a little bit distorted based on the person teaching. So understand that everything that I teach is definitely rooted in Krav Maga, but it comes from a combination of my learning through Krav Maga Worldwide, my mentorship by a good friend of mine, Amir Peretz, and then my experience as a father, Cheryl's experience as a mother and a woman, and my experience as a law enforcement officer, SWAT guy, and a military instructor. So the first thing that I want to talk about is self-defense. When we think about self-defense, what is the first thing for you that comes to mind as the most important?
Mindset. Absolutely mindset.
Yeah, I agree. If you have a pyramid, like Maslow's hierarchy of human needs, we have a Krav Maga pyramid of self-defense needs. And the base of our pyramid is mindset. Now, mindset could be divided into a couple of different categories. The first one would be kind of awareness. The idea that evil exists. You can't ration with it. You can't reason with it. You can't ignore it. Patton said it after World War II. He said, the best defense is having a really good built-up military because madmen create war. Not rational men, not reasonable men, but madmen create war. And to disarm is the idea or the equivalent of removing the fire department and hoping there'll be no fires because the fire department is now gone. And so the first step truly to self-defense is not to take some course to make yourself feel better, but to acknowledge that evil exists. Now, once you've made that acknowledgement, you can then start to be mindful of how you behave and how you think. So I'll let Cheryl lead off first. As a woman, I can't relate. I can certainly teach, but I can't relate. How would you apply this idea of mindset to you as a woman, not as a mother, just as a woman?
Well, I would say recognize your vulnerability, right, in the world. Recognize that most of us are smaller than men. Most of us are not as strong as men. There are exceptions, of course, but there's biology involved, right? So don't try to deny that vulnerability. Embrace it and take responsibility for yourself and make sure that you don't put yourself in a situation that might end up being dangerous. Be aware when you're walking around. Don't have your head in your phone. Think about how you carry yourself. Don't be afraid to have somebody, call you the B word or accuse you of being racist or whatever. Trust your gut. If you feel that a situation is not safe, it's probably not. And even if it was, better safe than sorry.
Yeah, there's a number of books that I recommend to brand new students in my martial arts studio. And I definitely am going to recommend them to you guys. And I don't get anything for this. This is about helping you guys be as safe as you possibly can. And one of them is The Gift of Fear. And The Gift of Fear is essentially, the whole book could also be trust your gut. The idea that imagine the elevator opens and you're a petite female. And in that elevator is somebody bigger and stronger looking and you don't know them. And let's just say they're a different race than you. And the scenario doesn't matter. They're just different from you. And the reason I provide that context is you could imagine that if you were white and they were black, or you were black and they were white, and you refused to get on the elevator because your gut told you maybe it's not safe to get in the elevator because it's late at night and you're alone and you don't know that person. But you get on anyway because you don't want that person to think that you're racist or to judge you. So you risk your own safety to put yourself into a situation that is dangerous. Large male, petite female. You don't know them. Maybe it's late at night. Maybe you're not in your home. You're in a city that's unknown to you. There's nothing wrong with waiting for the next elevator, and that doesn't make you a bad person. Trusting your gut. They talk about deer. If a deer hears a noise, its head pops up and it looks around and then it takes off. The deer doesn't say to itself, it was probably nothing, and then continue eating. The deer bolts. Humans, we're the species that goes, maybe it wasn't a bad situation. Maybe that wasn't somebody following me. Maybe those guys that are hanging out by my car in that parking lot late at night, even though my car is not around anything else, maybe they're nice and they just want to ask me for directions. So a big part of mindset is trust your gut. Make good decisions, because the fight that you win all the time is the fight that you avoid. Now, I do want to talk briefly, before we move on to step 2, about parenthood. I'm a new parent. At the time of this recording, I have a 5-year-old, and being a parent of a 5-year-old is different than being the parent of a teenager. She's got 2 kids, a young teenager and an older teenager. So let's start with you. How do you have a younger daughter and an older son. How do you apply mindfulness and mindset and self-defense to your parenting?
I think, again, a lot of what I believe comes down to personal responsibility, right? And it would be a wonderful world if we could all act however we want and trust that everybody around us would behave well. That would be great. Then we could just go through and make our mistakes and there'd be no consequences. But unfortunately, sometimes you make a mistake and there is a very large consequence. So certainly for my older child and for all of us, but especially I think teenagers and young adults, to be aware again of not putting yourself in a position where you're incapacitated, where you're unconscious, and you're not.
How could you be incapacitated or unconscious as a teenager?
You go to a frat party and you drink to the point where you pass out. And again, it would be wonderful if you could do that and somebody would put a blanket over you and take care of you until you come to. But unfortunately, we know from things we read about and hear about, and perhaps even people we know personally, that that's not always the case. And people act badly, and especially young people who are also under the influence. Good people still act badly, right? So at the end of the day, you have to take responsibility for yourself and not allow yourself to be in a situation where you can be taken advantage of physically.
Yeah, and the reason I asked her to state what may be the obvious or may not to you, how could you end up unconscious or in a position where you have the an inability or a difficult ability to make good decisions, inebriated, drunk, right? Is because it seems obvious to us right now. We're in a gym designed to teach people self-defense. We're wearing clothes that say Krav Maga, right? It's very easy for us to say, oh, well, obviously, if you drink, you're going to be in a poor decision-making capacity. But what I've learned as a police officer is that if you do not mentally prepare for something, if you do not mentally picture the scenarios, the outcomes, the potential outcomes, and talk yourself through, well, what would I do? It could be as obvious, it could be the most obvious thing there is, but you're not going to do it in that moment under stress because you haven't trained for it. You do not rise to the level of your expectations. You fall to the level of your training. So having a conversation with your kids or your wife or yourself, what will you do if you end up so drunk you can't drive home? It doesn't mean you're wrong. It's not what will you do, how dare you, you should never do that, because you make mistakes. And that necessarily drinking till you're drunk is not necessarily a mistake. I know lots of adults that do that on a regular basis. But talking yourself through it, what will I do? How will I get home? Do I trust the people around me? Who will I call? You have a teenager, I have a 5-year-old. My son gets lost, can't find me. Who are safe people that you can go to? His name is Logan. Logan, who's a safe person for you to go to? Police officers. Who else is safe? Teachers. Who else is safe? Security guards. Great. Now, if he gets lost, he can remember that conversation. So don't think just because you're an adult, you have all the answers. It's not about fancy moves. It's not about fancy techniques. The very first thing you can do to keep yourself safe is to acknowledge that there are bad people out there. You can't control them, but you can control you. And the best way to control you is to mentally prepare for it. And step 2, physically prepare for it. So guys, tune in on the next episode where we get to the physical part. That's what she said. See you on the next one. I'm Coach Eric, and that's Coach Cheryl. Blue Titan On Demand. Thanks for watching. Out.
Be safe.